Welcome to Door Insider, where we take a deep dive into the mindset, the why, and the how of the industry's top entrepreneurs, leaders, recruiters, and salespeople. We are the Door Nation. Here is your host, Lee Barber. Let's go.
All right, gang. Welcome to Door Insider, Season 2, Episode 10. Today's special guest is Cameron Brown. Cam has been in door-to-door for 15 years. He started at Vivint, where he spent 9 years. Then 2 years at Clear Home, where he ran 10,000 accounts. Then to Vivint Solar, and now at Legacy Power. Cam is currently business partners with Seth Grinney. Cam, welcome to the show, brother. I'm excited to have you on, man. I've wanted to get you on for a while. You know, I started the podcast with Zach Ross years ago, and I've kind of gone through evolutions in this thing. And I like to have other people from the industry on the show. And lately and just so the listeners know, I haven't been doing this out of well, I am loyal to Legacy, but not just because of Legacy, but I've started to focus on some of our people because I've just grown to love and respect some of the humans that we have here, and I think that our stories should be told. And you've been someone that I've wanted to get on because your story is impressive and just what you've done personally, but who you are as a person. And, you know, getting to work with you over time, who you are, how you've, you know, mentally, emotionally supported me and other people, and just watching how you move, right, you're just an impressive human. So to have you on is an honor, and I'm excited for the guest to to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm excited to be here. I'm a little biased too, I think. We have Joey Weir. You know, I know you had him on the other day. Yeah. You've had Seth on a couple of times, and so I agree, man. I'm extremely biased to the people we've had on from Legacy, but also, you know, you've had some of the greats. You've had Ty Williams. You've had the Rawlings twins. You've had Seabaugh. Yeah. Some of the goats of the industry. So I'm excited to be here.
So I always like to start with a little bit of people's story. The diversity in our industry is, you know, so amazing. I come from a very different background than you come from. But, you know, that's what I love about our industry is that it is, in my opinion, the great human equalizer. It doesn't care what color you are, what age you are, what gender you are. Yep. It's an equalizer. So what was early Cam like? You know, like getting into, what was your early family like? And then, you know, what got you into doors?
Yeah, man. I grew up in Cache Valley. And so, you know, some of the greatest in the industry come from that neck of the woods.
The mothership.
So you have the Franks, you have Cody Vabel, you have the Toon Twins, you have Seabaugh, you have Doug Robinson, Nick Elison. I mean, the list goes on and on. Yeah. Right. And so I don't know if there's a little bit of a peer pressure there to have to get into the industry when you hear of names like that. But I grew up in Logan, man, had an amazing childhood. I didn't know what I didn't know back then. Right. And so I grew up, mom and dad in the house, an older brother. I was number 2, and then I had a baby brother and a baby sister. And so we had 4 of us kids. We grew up in downtown Logan, right by the hospital there. A lot of people know where that is. And so my dad worked graveyards. My mom worked at the school. And so it was either one of them in the house or none of them in the house, right? My dad did odds and ends all the time. He's kind of a handyman, and so he was always doing whatever he could to provide a little bit more money. We grew up without a lot of money, and I didn't know it back then.
You had a lot of love, probably.
Had a lot of love, and so that's one of the greatest, I guess, kind of stories and examples of my upbringing. As it's hard for me to try to get that same feeling to my kids now. Right? I'm married. I have 4 kids. And I look for that exact same kind of storybook lifestyle for my kids. I want them to be able to go around the block for 8 hours at a time without me checking on them. Yeah. I want them to go play baseball in the cul-de-sac with all the other kids, right? And that just doesn't exist anymore. And so growing up in Logan, I absolutely loved it. I watched my parents give until it hurt. And that was one thing that kind of stuck with me all through growing up. My parents were the first one to, take the neighbor who just had surgery over a casserole dish. Or my dad was the first one to go mow the lawn for the single widow across the road right after he just worked a 16-hour day. And so those were the things that I didn't actually understand how much they would impact me later on in life. But I took those to heart. I started mowing lawns when I was, probably 10, 11 years old. And I didn't even do it for money at first. There's a lady named Mardine Matthews, single lady. She was probably 55, 60 years old. I watched my dad mow her lawn growing up. She was never married, never had kids. And so once I was old enough to kind of, A, be able to push a lawnmower, and B, understand the value creation for other people, I started mowing Mardine's lawn. And she didn't have a lot of money. She actually probably had no money. She worked at a school for the university for a long time. And so every time I mowed her lawn, she would bring me over a gallon of ice cream. That's how she paid me.
Well, that's pretty dang good.
And so I ended up becoming extremely close with this lady. And it was at that age where I finally started to actually realize the impact you could have on other people's lives. And so we'll dive into this stuff a little bit later, but it was one of those lollipop moments. Drew Dudley talks about it all the time, where people do these things in your life that have these meaningful impacts. And if it's up to us to kind of let them know how impactful it was. And I've always wanted to go back, now that I've had a little bit more success in my career, and let Mardine know how grateful I am for the opportunity that I had to create that relationship that ended up teaching me the value of giving back until it hurt. Wow. And so, I absolutely love the childhood, man. Love Logan. Went to Logan High School. Had a phenomenal high school coach. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the podcast. Also taught me a tremendous amount of value and a tremendous amount of skill set when it came to getting the most out of people. Started going to Utah State University. I met my wife. We dated for 4 years. We ended up getting married 15 years ago. Last December. That first year,
I know it's weird because I'm 47. I'm an old man in the industry.
Yeah.
But you and your wife are like an old married couple.
We're old, man.
I love being with you guys. Like it's like, because I have to remind myself, like these guys have been married. Yeah.
It's a little bit of cliche, but everybody always talks about it. That was the greatest sell of my life, right? And it literally was the greatest sell of my life. And so, being married for 15 years has been amazing. Everything I thought marriage would be, it's been that times 10.
Yeah.
And having kids, being a dad, it's the greatest joy in my entire life. And so, I have 4 kids now, an amazing marriage, and really it was starting door to door in that first year, 2008. I was recruited by Casey Baugh and Nick Elison, and I was scared. I didn't do the Mormon mission like most of these guys had. I had never knocked doors. I had never sold anything.
What was Sebah's position back then?
He was a regional.
He was regional back then.
Regional. They were going to Dallas. So I signed up. I started recruiting immediately. We did a couple of preseason trips. I was horrendous, man.
You sucked.
I sucked. I felt like I was walking really fast. I felt like I was knocking really hard. I felt like I was going through the motion really, really well. But the results weren't there.
Yeah.
And I couldn't explain it, right? Because you don't know what you don't know if you've never done the job.
Yeah.
And so a lot of doubt set in. A couple of months before that summer, we found out my wife had a disease called polycystic kidneys, where she grows these massive cysts on her kidneys until they basically suffocate the kidney, it's dead, and she has to get a transplant. And so we were nervous, man. We didn't understand what that meant. We didn't understand how fast it happened. And so we started going to all these different kidney doctors and kidney specialists in Utah. We decided not to go out the first summer. I had state benefits at the time. I was working at a juvenile detention center and mowing lawns. And so I would work a graveyard. They'd pick me up at 6 a.m. I'd go mow lawns until 3.
How old were you?
At this time, I would have been 21.
Yeah.
And so I was working somewhere between 16, 17 hours a day. We were bringing in $75,000 together, me and my wife. She was a full-time stylist. I was working for the state and mowing lawns. We thought we were wealthy.
Yeah.
Rent was $350.
Yeah.
We had no car payment, 2-door Chevy Cavalier, gold rims.
Balling.
We were balling, man.
Yeah.
And so we decided not to go out that year. The following year, Nick Ellison came to me. He's like,
well, hold on. So
Yeah.
you had gone out. So before this happened, before you guys found out, what's the disease called?
polycystic kidneys.
Before you found out she had polycystic kidneys, you had been out a little bit.
Yeah.
1 year?
Just preseason.
Preseason.
Yeah.
And then you decided not to go out in the summer.
Yep.
And in preseason, and I think, I just want to talk about this for a second. I love the stories of guys who sucked, right? And they just gritted it through until they didn't suck anymore.
Yeah.
But how much did well, it's tough because I want to ask, how much did the suck make you not want to go out? But then you add your wife getting a disease, and like, I think, how do those two factors, was that part of like not going out?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could say it wasn't,
But,
right? But I think a little bit of doubt in the back of my mind on top of that, I think it for sure made it a little bit easier not to go out that first year.
Yeah, like I suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but I had recruited a couple of guys, 3 guys, Chase Bennett and Dallin, my wife's first cousin. And they all went out that first year and absolutely smashed it, along with Nick Ellison, a dude I had known throughout high school and watched him play football, super good athlete. And so that next year he came back and really, really started dumping on the recruiting cap.
Yeah. So what happened? So here you go through not going out.
Yep.
You probably go through some feelings. And I've seen people go through, you go out and you see them going out and you can kind of probably makes you feel a certain kind of way.
Sure.
'Cause you're like, they're out being successful. And then
Sure.
here comes Nick back. And then he says, come out. And then do you do preseason and then a summer?
Yeah.
What's that year like for you?
So it's kind of a Wolf of Wall Street story. He ends up taking us to Olive Garden that next year.
A big spender.
He'd made like $160,000, $180,000,
Oh, yeah.
and that's 5-star restaurant in Logan.
Yeah.
Right. That's nice. And so he ends up showing me his 1099 how much he made, and it was like, dude, I'm in.
Yeah.
Like I'm in. Let's go. So we started doing preseason again.
Yeah.
And again, I suck.
Yeah.
I sold my first account in Reno, Nevada, ever. It was to a man that was blind and his wife. They were elderly, absolutely loved the medical pendant.
Yeah.
I wake up the next morning to a phone call that they had just canceled.
Canceled it.
And I'm in like shambles.
Yeah.
Right. Like I thought I just made my first $360 or whatever it was, and now I'm back to zero.
Texted the wife. You're like, I sold a deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Scratch it.
Scratch it.
And so I'm almost out of it again. I'm like talking to my wife, hey, I'm going to text my boss back at the detention center. I think I can get my job back.
Yeah.
I have like another year and a half of college. I'm good. Like I think I can get through this.
Yeah.
And we had one more blitz to Plainview, Texas. And Nick talks me into going. I'm like, hey, I'll go. We show up the first 3 days. It's more rain than I've ever seen in my entire life, right? I mean, we can't even knock. The roads are flooded. You can't drive it. You can't drive your car down the road. We're literally stuck inside a hotel for 3 days. I'm texting my wife the entire time. I have no idea what I'm doing out here. Like this is game over.
Yeah.
She talks me into giving it 100% for the next 5 days before I come home.
Mm-hmm.
I end up selling 8 in that 5 days, and go home stoked. We end up going out that year. I zeroed 2 days the entire summer. Ended up funding 181 accounts my first year. Made 115 grand, and the rest is history, man. It was all uphill from there.
It's weird because I have always been in like I still use some Vivint terminology because that's where I grew up, but in a GM program, right? The year-round program.
Yeah.
I was born into the industry in the very beginning stages in 17 of Vivint's GM program. So I didn't know, and I just had a 3-year-old daughter and I'm divorced. Like I'm not going anywhere like for summer.
Yep.
And I just knocked in Vegas year round. But what I know the differences are is, in the summer program, there's no distractions. There's no, and it's like you force yourself into it. What I see in the GM program, I have guys that have always and still do struggle with these things in their heads where they want to quit and they suck. And it's really easy to cross compare yourself to somebody, and as you age and mature in the industry, your mind starts to operate in different ways. But in the very beginning, you're very immature and you're like, he's great and I suck. And sometimes it'll be like, this dude got here a week after me and he's better than me. Like I got to go home. Finding that, what helped you push through that? Was it your wife? Was it just somebody believing in you and just saying like, just don't quit for 5 more days and go in?
Yeah, it was that, and I've always been extremely hard-headed, right? I have an older brother. He's 2 years older than me, and they were kind of like the cat's meow in high school.
Yeah.
Him and his dudes were state champions 2 years in high school football. They had all the chicks, they had all the grades, they had everything, right? And so I fought with these guys a lot. I grew up not like in your sense of growing up, right? But I grew up kind of with that chip on my shoulder. I was never the fastest. I was never the smartest. I was never the best looking. I was never anything, right? And so how I relate to it now is there's a book called So Great They Can't Ignore You, right? The reality for people like me is we were never that great. And so what we needed to do, or kind of how I changed my paradigm in that, was just be so valuable they can't ignore you, right? And so I started creating value at a really young age, doing anything I could, right? In football, I'd go up to my coaches. I don't care what position I play. I just want to be on the team.
Yeah.
I just want to start. I just want to create value for you at whatever position you need me to play, right? And that's how I was with everything in life. I didn't care what my job was. I just wanted to be able to partake in it.
Just add value.
Right.
That's interesting, man, because I had a pretty just not a great childhood, but a lot of my feelings came from the same stuff internally. Was I didn't fit in, I wasn't good enough, I couldn't be enough, I wasn't smart enough. I have attention deficit disorder and dyslexia, but in the 80s when I was in school, they put me in special ed, and I was in special ed with people had like Down syndrome. Yeah. And I was like, I thought I was stupid. I just thought I was dumb because of that. And it's a really difficult, those are, and I still struggle with some of that in my adult age. I understand where my intellect lies now, but there's a lot of times where I'm constantly trying to prove to myself that I fit in a room, or I deserve to be there. And as I've grown and matured in my life, like, I've started to understand myself and my work ethic and what I do, and that I do deserve to be in those. But it's heavy stuff going through that in your childhood, and it's human emotions, man. We like to say we're all so different, but we go through a lot of the same stuff. Yep. So what do the next couple years look like? I mean, because I want to talk about the here and now too, and some of your stuff. But you end up working with Casey, really strong, and Casey is, anybody that's ever listened to me knows he's one of my not up and close mentors, but somebody that I've watched over the years and tried to emulate because I respect who he is and how he moves, and I like it. Yeah. So you got to be in a pretty cool circle of some of the names that you've mentioned, or just some of the goats in the industry. Whether what anybody wants to say, they built some of the greatest organizations and helped the most amount of people. So what do the next few years of progression look like for you in building orgs and being part of that, and building the man you are today? Yeah.
So Vivint was very consistent, right? I was never a 300 account guy. I typically funded 175 to 225 every single year. Mm-hmm. I think there was a year where I had a kid in June that I didn't end up doing that, but ran some very successful teams. I managed with Nick Elison for a really long time. We ran 3,000 account teams, won the cup a couple of years. But you're right, man. It was I see Casey from a different light than most people in the industry. Mm-hmm. Not that we're best friends, right? Mm-hmm. It's just that I was lucky enough to be close to him. That he is a great salesperson. Mm-hmm. He is great at recruiting. His content's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. All that aside, he's probably a better person than he is in the game, right? And that's what most people probably don't know about Casey. He was always the first one to donate to any charity. He was always the first one to say, hey, let me help you do this or let you do that. And watching him raise his kids, watching him be part of that world, that was the part that taught me more about Casey than any book, any mentorship or anything else. And so it's a little bit different paradigm for me watching Casey and some of these other guys. The Rawlings, I've been really, really good friends with them since 2003. I've known them since high school. Some of the best dudes in the world, right? Yeah. And as good as they are on doors, and as good as they are in recruiting, and some of these other, they're better people than they are at doors.
They're good men.
Yeah. So ran really good teams. We got to a weird point at Vivint to where we felt like we were a little bit capped out in upward trajectory.
Well, there was a little bit of that.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of people started feeling that eventually. And
Yeah.
so some of my guys that have been with me for years trying to make their first 100 grand or 200 grand, they wanted to do something else. They wanted to manage. They wanted to run teams. And a lot of these guys, just to be honest with you, they don't probably have the skill set to go pull it off at Vivint. And so we made a quick run to DirecTV, AT&T. We worked with Clear for 2 years. We ran over 10,000 accounts a year with them. And it gave guys an opportunity to go lead, to go manage, to go recruit, to go be that dude. Now it was their story, right? Quickly jumped into Vivint Solar, worked with some phenomenal people over there, phenomenal organization, and right in the middle of COVID.
Well, let me ask you something. So,
Yo.
I know you, and I know the Rawlings brothers, and
Yo.
I know Casey too. And none of these guys are, like you said, we're not. I do consider them, in a sense, friends. We're not buddies, though.
Yeah.
Have they all given me personal advice that I've taken? Yeah, 100%. Are they mentors in some senses? Yeah. But you're still friends with them all.
Yeah.
Good friends, like in the sense where, and I mean good friend, like a good friend, like a person who's a good person. Each person still likes each other actually as a person.
Sure, 100%.
So you're leaving Vivint. I want to hear about that because one of the things I want to talk about later is, I'm going to interview Seth after this, and I want to talk to you guys both about loss because it's something that I went through and I've overcome it, but I get a little fixated on it because I like to hear other people's experiences and how they maneuvered, because I believe that there's a right way and a wrong way to leave, and I also think that it's okay to leave, so I used to think I'm a good follower, and I heard this thing that said, don't be a follower, be a student. And then it came to me, it dawned on me when I was going through some of my own personal evolutions that every student doesn't stay with their teacher.
100%.
And that's okay. And if the teacher has the purest is the purest of self and is just, I'm going to teach, regardless of what happens after, then it's almost the teacher's greatest honor that the student leaves and goes somewhere else, because there's two different relationships. In my opinion, the long-term relationships are what build big things.
Yep.
But sometimes people leave. So there you are, you spend years with these guys, and you're going to go off for your reasons and your guys' reasons, and you're going to leave. How does that go?
It was hard, man. Right? Vivint becomes part of your identity.
Yeah,
right.
100%.
It's all you wear. It's all you
100%.
rock.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, I believe how you do anything is how you do everything.
I agree.
And when you're at Vivint, to be in the top 1%, that's all you do is Vivint. And so, for me, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional, right? It was logical for me in the sense that I needed to give some of my best friends that had worked for me at Vivint for 4 or 5 years an opportunity to lead and grow and run a team, and I just didn't believe they could pull it off there. And then secondly, relationships have always meant way more to me than the money. I told Nick Ellison this from day one, and if you ever talk to him, he'll probably be able to relate back to it. But I told him that once the money starts interfering with the friendship, I'm out. And so, not that it ever became there, but when you start to cross those two, money and relationships, things get messy really, really quick.
Yeah.
And to me, it's never been worth it. I'd rather make half as much money and have twice as many friends. And not very many people operate like that in this industry. And it's sad.
So you just went and had conversations.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy how hard most people find that to do?
It's crazy.
It's insane.
Blows me away. In an industry of communicators, how bad most people are at communicating.
And what was on, and so, and again, I've been focused on Crucial Conversations, and it's just a book that I'm reading it. I'm like, wow, they wrote a book about me, but it's about human nature and how we think in these things.
Yep.
And so how are those, because here's what happens is I tell myself, I'm going to go talk to so-and-so, but he's going to say this and he's going to take all my money and I'm not going to get any of my install pay. And then he's going to sue me and take my, and so I'm just not going to tell him. I'm going to be a sneaky bastard.
Yeah.
But in my experience, when people give you the trust and respect to actually come and talk to you, that's not how it goes. So what was on the other end of that conversation when you talked to those guys?
Yeah. A lot of it was nothing but wish you well.
Yeah.
Right? Me and Nick had been best friends for almost a decade now. Our wives were extremely close. Our families were extremely close. And so I think there was a little bit of stress.
It hurts a little
emotion,
bit.
yeah.
It's the heart. It hurts the heart.
Sure. But there was no ill will. There was no, we're going to sue you. There was no shit talk. It was all, hey, man, wish you well.
Yeah.
If things don't work out, we're always here. If they do, dude, we're cheering you on.
Come back.
Yep.
So you go to, you do 10,000 accounts with those guys. Then here we are, Vivint Solar, putting in a little time. I did the same thing. I went over to Vivint Plus with Steven and Dusty and those. Love those guys. They're great guys. And you know, for me, it was, I needed to just spread my wings a little bit more. So you go through that. Tell me a little bit about the time that you spent with that, and then what brought you over to Legacy.
Yeah, I think one of my greatest, or what I loved about Vivint Solar was just the people there, right? I mean, Ty and Jordan Williams they're
such good dudes.
Those dudes are phenomenal. Their content's phenomenal. Their delivery is even better than the content.
Ty is like a door-to-door poet, almost. He's like I want to interview him again, dude. I'm like, I just want to hear him talk.
He is very, very good.
Yeah.
And so working with those guys, Brock Morris and a lot of the guys out there, and T.O., it was fun, man. We were a top 3 team every quarter, crank and flagship. Things were phenomenal. COVID happens right as we move out to California, and so we stick it out as long as we can.
And it was nasty in California. It was bad in Nevada, but it was nasty in California. They were not playing games.
Yeah, I mean, you saw people driving down the freeway in astronaut suits. Right? Yeah. It was
fish tanks on their head.
Absurd over there, man. But my wife just couldn't do the homeschool stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, our kids need that TLC from teachers. They need friends. They need to get around. And so we ended up moving back. I was looking at a couple of other companies. At the time. I had known of Legacy, right? I've known Doug and Luke for 20 plus years. They're from the same hometown I am. And they found out I was in town. We ended up linking up for what was supposed to be a couple of hours. It turned into 3 nights till 3, 4 in the morning, running to Doug's son's baseball games and all of this stuff. And, long story short, we don't know what we're going to have you do. We don't know what we're going to pay you. We just want you here.
Yeah.
And after seeing what they were doing with what they had, I was sold. Yeah. I was sold the first hour I met with those guys.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing about Legacy. We can talk a little bit about it, but when you're younger in the industry, you're like, what's my red line and this and that, and it's like, and you miss the higher things. And when Legacy, here's what I tell people when I'm talking to them about Legacy, about coming over or I'm recruiting, I'm like, fly to Salt Lake City with me.
Yeah.
And because here's the easiest way to see what the inside of Legacy is come in the house.
Yeah.
And when you come in the house with Legacy, you have to come in to see the intrinsic value and what's happening in there and who the people are and how Doug talks and how Luke talks and how they feel about their people, and now how you and Seth are, and just the whole organization. And so like I vibe with what you're saying, because it's hard to put into words, and to me it's there's. I'm 47, so I've seen some, I saw Steve Jobs create Apple.
Yep.
So Zuckerberg, we've all seen Zuckerberg create Facebook. There's some things where we're like, holy shit. Doug and Luke have created one of the largest privately held solar organizations in the nation, and done it with no debt. And it's a phenomenal thing, but it's more of a phenomenal thing to see who they are. And once you see who they are, you can see why they did what they did. So I vibe with that. Like, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, a lot of it boils down to the intangibles.
Yeah.
Right? And that's how, me, Seth, you, a lot of the guys that we've talked about, the Rawlings, Ty Williams, that was what Vivint taught, right? People didn't understand how great Vivint was until you were there.
Yeah.
Everybody in the industry made more than us, but nobody did more accounts. Explain it.
That's right.
Right.
And they would be on there talking about, you go on the little Facebook chats, and they're always, and I honestly can't stand those things. I hate them. And they're on there, the Vivint, you're not getting paid, and I'm like,
yeah.
You just don't get it, man. It's like, and they're always trying to make fun of people always want to, try and pull you down from a height when they don't understand the level that you're on, or they just don't.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And what's even more insane to me, and I've never been able to explain it right, is back then everybody had the 42x multiple. Everybody had a 46x multiple, and Vivint only pays $450 for a basic package, and you've got to now charge $69.99. And we went from 36-month contracts to 42 to 60, and everything was so negative.
Yeah.
Right. But then they turned into a $1 billion business.
Yeah.
And so it's comical to me.
Yeah.
It really is that there's so many haters in the industry when we're all just trying to do the exact same thing.
We are trying to, and I was watching this thing the other day, and it was a kind of a political thing, but it was just two opposing people, and the one guy, he says, "Explain this to me," and so he explains it pretty eloquently, and the other guy goes, "I don't have a problem with that," and he goes, "That's your problem, is that you think the world revolves around if you have a problem with it or not.
Yeah.
Mind your own damn business, and if don't try and pull people down because you don't understand, or just talk smack because it's not your thing.
Yeah.
There's something there tangible in the intangibles, and that's why the organization is so big. And but those are some of the best things about the industry,
100%.
is that just be open to that. So you come into Legacy, and then what's that look like?
Dude, it was tough. I went from
You still don't have a title. You're just you're the man behind the curtain.
I'm just the ghost.
You're just like the badass. You're like the hidden assassin.
Yeah. You seen The Wizard of Oz?
Yeah, I have.
The loud voice behind the curtain.
That's Cam Brown.
That's it.
Yeah.
So
he who has no name.
That's it. No, dude, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah.
It's been more than I could have ever imagined in a million different ways. So I came in as just a corporate recruiter. Started recruiting guys to a traveling program, to direct program with Seth and some of the other guys, John Soriano and a few of the other guys that were running teams and multiple teams at that time. And it was good.
Yeah.
It was extremely easy. When you have as much optionality as Legacy presents,
Yeah.
That's what made me want to recruit there so bad.
Yeah.
Is because most people like me and you, Lee, we work for a company where it's one size fits all. And in doing so, you have to pressure customers a little bit more in some situations that maybe they don't fit that box perfectly.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that Legacy had 4 or 5 or 6 different options in every market,
Yeah.
that was the one thing that drew me in immediately, was I can recruit the masses to this place.
Yeah.
And so over the next 4 to 6 months, we went and picked up probably a couple hundred reps, some small franchises, partners is what we call them now. And in doing so, Seth Grenny had just moved back to Utah. He started working out of Legacy HQ in Lehigh, and we started recruiting together. It was just kind of a natural thing where he was there. He had a lot of teams in Texas, Arizona, Vegas, some really geographically it made sense, right? It's easier to get a guy to move to Phoenix, Arizona than it is to Maryland or Massachusetts.
Yeah,
and
easy.
so we started plug and playing a lot of guys together. And then he invited me to a retreat, his first leadership retreat. It was in Heber City up at Doug's cabin. And I'll never forget it, man. I walked into this cabin, and I mean, mind you, to this point, 11 of my years in this industry had been at Vivint. And so it's the flat brim, most of the guys are returned missionaries on a little bit of test. It's this picture perfect rep. And
no coffee, just pre-workout.
This retreat was the exact opposite, right? You got guys tattooed head to toe. You got guys talking about getting out of prison after 10 years.
Yeah.
You have guys that, I mean, everything and anything existed in this room.
Yeah.
And it immediately sparked so much curiosity and so much interest in me, because I had never been exposed to that in the industry, right? We have an issue in this industry where everybody is painted in this perfect light.
Yeah.
And when you get vulnerable or when you get real, a lot of us are worried that competitors are going to use that against us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that was the one thing, the most, I guess, probably the biggest differentiator that I noticed immediately with Seth's group is they use vulnerability as power and as authenticity, where most people in this industry use it as a black mark or as leverage against somebody else.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting about that is I actually, it depends on your paradigm, but I actually see the ones who use it against people's vulnerability or their scars or their marks. I see that as a form of weakness.
Sure.
if you need to stoop to the level of recruiting on something somebody's done and made better, or somebody's vulnerability, or somebody's soft spot, that's a weakness on you, man. That's what I see. And you know, I think when you get around the right group of people, you start to see that that's the way that good people move, is that they are vulnerable and that they are pure and that they are real. And we all have, like, it's, you know, my story is, you know, to me, it's redemption, man. I've lived 2 different lives, and I just had my daughter up here. She's 22, and you know, I went to prison when she was 6 months old, and her mom brought her to prison and stood her up in between the glass and said I'd never see her again, ever. Yeah. And that's who I was, and I deserved it. And I'm glad that she did it, and I never saw her again until she was 20. And I've now had the honor to serve her and be a different man and a different, the father that she deserves. And I've been able to do that because I redeemed myself. Yeah. And anybody that, in my opinion, you know, anybody that wants to take advantage of that kind of information or that kind of redemption story, or just anything of that nature is to me despicable. Like, you should praise those kinds of things. And so I vibe with what you're saying, man. And it's been cool to watch you too, because like you're, and I don't want to paint Notorious as like, you know, it's not just it's such a diverse group, man. It is. And it's like, because when I want to say you're one of us, but what are you? You're like, that's the thing about Notorious. It doesn't matter where you came from, if you have tattoos, or if you're Mormon, or if you're Christian, or if you're an ex-felon, or if you're this, or if you're that. It's a bunch of human beings who have just become monstrously loyal to each other, and that are all geared towards becoming better human beings on a daily basis. It's the best version of yourself and helping others to do the same, literally living the legacy motto. Yep. And you represent that in the rooms of, I mean, yeah, you don't need to come from where I've come from for me to have as much respect for you personally as I do, Cam Brown. Like, I love you.
Thank you, man.
So it's cool to hear that story. So there you are in the cabin, and you're like, what is this? Yeah. It's intriguing. And then what happens?
So me and Seth start working together. He asks Doug and Luke. I actually didn't even know about this yet. So he goes and asks Doug and Luke if he can basically hire me away from Legacy and just use me as a Notorious asset. Yeah. And I had known Seth. I had heard about Seth. I knew he worked with Bo and Jeff. And I knew he crushed the alarm game. Like, I knew he was good. I knew a lot about him, but I didn't know a lot about him. Yeah. Right. And so he approached me. We were at work, and he just said, hey, I talked to Doug and Luke, and I want to steal you away from Legacy. What are your thoughts? And I to be honest, I wasn't ready for the conversation. Yeah. Because I didn't know what it entailed. We didn't talk compensation. We didn't talk about role. We didn't talk responsibility. We talked nothing. It was just a blank. You know, that's how Seth communicates, as you know. 100%. It's just like he's going right for the juggernaut, and like, what's the answer? Yeah. And I think I fumbled around some words, and then got something out that was like, dude, let me like think about it a little bit, and I'll get back to you in a few weeks or whatever it is. And over that time, we ended up traveling together to a couple of his markets. And the more I got around his people, the more I wanted to be involved. Yeah. The more I saw the way he operated off of principles based instead of emotion, like most of us do in this industry. Mm-hmm. Me included. The more interested I was. And so anyway, we ended up inking up and saying, yeah, dude, like, Cam wants to be a Notorious asset. I'm all Notorious. Here we go. And it went from be a recruiter, help me build this thing, to I think we went somewhere, I don't know the exact numbers. We went from 300 to 400 reps to 1,100 reps in a matter of 10 to 14 months. Right.
I want you to unpack that for me, because as I've watched both of you guys move, and it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor working with you guys. Early, I'm a very emotional person. I am, and I've treated people poorly in my life due to it. Yeah. Because I couldn't control the strong emotions and I've served people because of it. I've had pros and cons to being an emotional person. And, Seth is, you and Seth both have emotions, but I vibe with what you're saying, that there's a lot more logic based, and I think part of that comes from a maturity level. But help unpack your paradigm of like making the difference in making decisions emotionally versus making them based off of principles.
Yeah. Really good question, man. And I vibe with that on the note that I was just like you growing up a lot with emotion. Mm-hmm. I was the one getting kicked out of every rec basketball game I ever played in. I was the one that had the friends that loved to talk shit but hated to fight. Mm-hmm. And so I was the one that felt like my value was, I'm not going to talk shit, but I guess I'll get hit for you. Right. Yeah. And so it was actually kind of a running joke with my in-laws and my wife, is that like Cam can't finish a rec league football game or a soccer game or a basketball game. I literally, it ended in a fight every time. Yeah. And so I just stopped playing. Yeah. And Seth actually jokes around with me about it now, is like that I stay so calm and collected and almost like just melatonin of like, hey, like just you do the exact same thing all the time, regardless of how it could be a situation of a 10 or a situation at a 2, my response is going to be very similar. Because if I don't do that, I'm going to fly off the hinges. Mm-hmm. And so that's what a lot of people don't know about me, is I used to be the dude that flew off the hinges all the time. My older brother cracks about it all the time. It is like we couldn't take Cam anywhere because I was the dude making a scene. I was the dude effing you and flipping you off. And I was extremely emotional, especially when it was people attacking my friends or family. Yeah. And so working with Seth, that was one of the first things that stood out to me, is everything the dude does is based on principle, right? And where we come from an industry where if somebody cuts your throat, it's like, how fast can we cut them back? Yeah. Or if somebody takes your reps, how fast can we take their reps? Yeah. Or if somebody's doing this to your red line, let's go drive their margin. Mm-hmm. I remember living that for 10 years in the alarm game. And quick story, I had been working with Seth for maybe 2 months, 3 months. There was a large group that was going to a competitor. And I remember being in Doug's office, and we're talking through, these guys probably had a couple $100,000 in the pipe. And they weren't being malicious yet. We thought they probably would turn a little bit more malicious in recruiting people, in talking a little bit of shit, in badgering the name a little bit. And so my knee-jerk reaction was like, dude, I wouldn't pay him a single thing for 6 months until you see what the damage is. Yeah. And Seth was like, that's not how we operate. I was like, what do you mean it's not how you operate? Like, are you from this industry? That's how everybody operates. Yeah. Right? And anyway, through that course of that meeting, I remember watching Seth move in a light of like, dude, I don't care if these people don't see value in me, if these people think they're better off at another company, if these people think whatever they want to think. They've earned the money. We're going to pay out every single dollar. We're going to make sure and take care of them. We're going to make sure and keep a relationship open with them. And I was just so caught off guard because I had never been exposed to that in the industry. And I think it was weeks later, I walk into our office and I'm asking him what he's doing. He's got his iPad up on the TV or whatever. He was doing a training for that team that just went to a competitor that we just paid $300,000 out to in pipe, right? And so it's those scenarios, it's those situations that have taught me a lot of watching the way that Seth operates. It doesn't matter if you're a 10, it doesn't matter if you're an A player, it doesn't matter if you're a C player, it doesn't matter if you're rich, fat, skinny, poor. It doesn't matter. Seth treats you the exact same. And that was something I wasn't used to in the industry. And so being able to calm myself down a little bit, being able to remove as much emotion as possible in every situation possible, it now lets me operate out of principle as well, where I don't let the emotion kick in.
Yeah, I like that, man, because I was just, one of the things I hate personally, and I can say I hate it because I do, I hate it. I hate it when people say this in this industry, it's business, it's not personal. Yep. Because it is personal, but in the same sense, the now Lee, the way that I view a lot of the emotional turmoil that I've had in the industry is just growth as a leader that I needed to have to become the person that I am. And what I've discovered now is that Yeah, it is a very personal business. I have one mission, and it's to make as many humans as great as I can,
Yep.
regardless of what happens after or what they do or how they move or how they act. And, watching you guys move has been a huge source for me. And if I'm honest with you, I went through about 2 years of going through personal turmoil that I needed to go through to learn how to grow. And I've been with you guys for about 8 or 9 months, and you guys have been you and Seth have been a huge part of my emotional growth. And just, we need to be around people to watch how they move. It's just like what you were watching Seth, I'm watching you guys. Yeah. And it's important to be able to be in a very personal business like we're in, and then still not rule yourself on emotions, and be able to come to the conclusions like, hey, yeah, my job was to, when I got a hold of you and you put your trust in me, my job was to teach you. My job was to love you. Yep. My job was to take care of you. My job was to embrace you. My job was to give you everything that I could. And if you want to make a move after that, for me, against me, ethically, unethically, I have to take my emotion out of it at that point and use logic and principles and say, my principles say this is how I move when this happens. Yep. And I don't do dirty, nasty shit. I calm down, I collect myself. My job has been done, and then you're going to do what you're going to do, and that doesn't have anything to do with me. And me watching you guys has helped me grow in that area, and it's been tremendous because I see, Joey Weir's one of my favorite. I have so many amazing people, in my org.
He's amazing.
I just love all my people, and they're huge people. But watching him go through stuff that I went through years ago, and you start to realize that that's all this industry is. It's just a massive, never-ending, thank God, evolution of self. Yep. Right? And some people don't do it, but when you do it, it's the most amazing thing. And so, I guess I would right now just like to say thank you for being a mentor to me in this part of the conversation and allowing me to watch how you move. And for being the person that you are. I'm grateful for you for that.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, 100%.
It's one of those things, I think you nailed it, man. It's Wooden talks about it, winning isn't everything. And he talks about people that show
Wooden, not Wooten, right?
Wooden.
Because Wooten.
Woot's all about winning. All that dude does is win.
Not Wooten. Wooden.
Wooden. And essentially he talks about by showing up to practice, the intensity, the buy-in, the intensity, all of these different things. If you do that, that's all you can ask, right? And like you, Lee, if you dump all you have into your people, if they stay, they stay. That's the win, right? That's the fun part, is the win. Yeah. But so many of us get obsessed with the outcome before we go through the process. And so that's one thing that I've been a little bit more focused on since joining Legacy is if we can do everything we can, if we can dump into our people as much as possible, if we can create as much value, if we can be there, love them, trust them, anything we can for them, if they're here at the end of the day, that's the icing on the cake. Yeah. But the cake is getting the opportunity to create the value for the people along the way. Mm.
I love that. So I want to get into some of the questions that I had written down. Yeah. One of them was, what builds big organizations? What builds big organizations? But that kind of like what you just said kind of embodies it, right? Like you and Seth have built, the Notorious division did what, 47 megawatts?
I think it was a little under 45 last year.
The size of that. Yeah. So it's funny. I'm on Instagram and we have the Notorious page, and some guy was writing about Notorious, and I don't think he understood what Notorious was. And he's like, "I'll see you at the Golden Door Awards," and I'm like, "See if they have a Golden Island for us." And he's like, "Oh," and he kind of caught on. Yeah. Because once people understand the volume of that, right? 45 it's a massive amount.
Massive.
The amount of people that you and Seth have had to grow together, and you each have just different, and we'll talk about that a little later too. You each have just such different traits, but how has it been like growing an organization that size, and to me, like the industry sometimes is like trying to hold a kinetic sandcastle together with your hands, right? Where it's just like you get one built up and the other one falls apart. What has it been like building the organization that you guys are running currently?
That's it, man. That's a great analogy. The kinetic sand. It feels like once the masterpiece there, one of the walls starts to crumble.
Yeah.
But for us, it's been just trying to be consistent, right? It's trying to show up for our guys every day. It's us trying to implement processes and procedures that make sense. We're not perfect, man. We drop the ball a lot. We've probably dropped the ball in our personal lives. We've dropped the balls on reps. We've dropped balls on systems and processes and things that we should have been delegating that we didn't delegate. I mean, a million different things. One thing that I think me and Seth have done an extremely good job at is being consistent. I think our guys know exactly what they can get out of us. They know they can text us, call us, FaceTime us 24/7. And it's one of the things that now their people, this, your people expect out of you because you kind of expect it out of us, right? And so people talk about it all the time. The best leaders are the best followers. It's nothing that we didn't reinvent this wheel, right? There's people that have done this before us that are 10x us. All we're trying to do is get to our numbers and get to where there's enough perceived value for our people that they can hit their numbers and paint a big enough vision to take people with them. And so growing into large org, the byproduct is amazing. The money's amazing. The opportunity's amazing. It's life-changing, right? But the relationships in creating a large org is my favorite part.
Yeah.
I absolutely love when Keaton Mott calls me out of nowhere. I love when you and Misty send us a text that has nothing to do with work.
Yeah.
I love the relationship part. I love that we had a guy the other day, his dad just passed away. And I love, as heartbreaking and as horrible as that is, being able to connect with a human being in a time that is probably one of the hardest things to go through in your entire life. Being there for a person in that moment, that's worth more than any amount of money I could create for a best friend, or any amount of opportunity that I can give a guy. Hey, go run this team, or go do this, or here's what you can do over the next 5 years. Being there for people when they need it, that's the fun part to me.
Yeah, when you get in the industry initially, and I'm speaking for myself, but I know so many of us in the industry. A lot of us just get into it for the money,
sure.
Because you see the check, the Wolf of Wall Street thing, and that money is not a big enough why to stay on door. It's just not because this, listen, is this thing fun? Is it amazing? Is it growth? Absolutely, but in my experience in life, all growth that's important is incredibly difficult and painful. 100%. It's hard because you're changing who you are, and it takes time. And you learn those lessons, and you just get in for the money. And you're like, money, money, money. And then you get into people, and then the money. I'm so far past thinking about, and it's not because I make good money. I'm so far past thinking about money because it's not what I care about anymore, because at some point, and I don't know exactly when I guess if I thought about it hard enough, I could figure it out, but at some point I just fell in love with people.
Yep. 100%.
And that's been some of the problems for me too, in my early career of learning how to manage the relationships that had damage, was because I love doing what we do with people. Yep. And so I agree with you, man. I mean, I think the fun part, the enjoyable part, the emotional part, the joy part of everything that we do is in building up the people. Yep. It really is. And so I vibe with that. And people are ultimately our greatest investments and our greatest assets. So that's pretty dope. So I got the loss. I think we talked a little bit about how you deal with loss. I'm always interested in that. But how does your mind rationale go when somebody just, and I guess it's not the guy that comes and says, hey, Cam, it's been great working with you, the way you did with Nick. Hey, Nick, it's been great working with you for, 8 years. I'm going to go to, sell TVs now.
Yeah.
But they're like, sneaky, and they do some weird shit.
Yeah.
That hurts, right? Whatever they do. And that's my paradigm. Their paradigm is different. But for on opposite side, here's what I've determined. It's really hard to hurt down.
Yep.
Like you and Seth, it would be really hard for you to hurt me.
Yeah.
Because you're there to serve me. You're there to help me. You're there to help me grow. You've put your love and your trust and your faith in me, and served me in so many different ways. It's really, it's like up doesn't come down and start stabbing in the back.
Sure.
Down stabs up in the back. And that's just the way the industry is. And sometimes it goes that way and sometimes it goes the other way where people are honest. How do you deal with those? Is it just the paradigm of the principles that gets in there, and how have you matured in that way in your life?
Yeah, it is now for sure, and it wouldn't have been the same 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago, I would have been mother F-bombing you, and I was trying to fight, old men in the streets when they didn't want to buy alarms. Like, it was a very different, kind of a loose cannon emotional state.
Yeah.
That was Cam 10, 12, 14 years ago. I think one of the biggest things in my life have been my kids. My kids have been able to reel me in a lot.
Yeah.
And so understanding that not everybody sees value in you. That's hard for me, right? Not everybody sees the value in legacy. Not everybody cares about selling a premium product.
Yeah.
Some people just care about the commission. And who am I to tell them that they should care more about the product or more about a warranty than they should about the commission?
Yeah.
Right? Because I probably thought the latter also sometime in the last 15 years. And so for us, all we try to do is create as much value as possible for people and individuals in any situation that they are, whether it's financial, whether it's relationship-based, whether it's becoming a better person, whether it's becoming more educated, whether it's becoming, learning how to recruit, whatever it is. And me and Seth have talked about this topic a number of times. It's like, dude, if we're giving our people or giving any individual 100% and they leave, what else can you do?
Yeah, you're right.
Right? I mean, you can throw a fit and you can talk shit and you can get mad and you can cry and you can F-bomb whoever you want. The result's the exact same. They're still gone.
Yeah.
Right? And so just like getting mad at this, Lee, getting mad at a customer on the doors and letting them mess up your vibe for the next 2 to 3 hours. That was something that took me probably 3 years on the doors to understand that dude shut the door and he went back to his TV dinner.
He didn't think about you at all.
And watching WWF wrestling.
Yeah.
I was the one that had to deal with the consequence of being pissed off for the next 3 to 4 hours.
Yeah.
And while he's eating a TV dinner and loving life, I'm still pissed off at him.
Yeah.
Right? And so same thing with recruiting or same thing with loss is people can't dictate my emotional state anymore. If they want to work with us, if they see value in us and in Notorious and Legacy, we would love to have them. We want to build with them. We want to be able to provide as much value as possible.
Yeah.
And if they don't, we wish them well. We hope they kick ass wherever they go. And we want to stay friends with everybody.
Yeah.
And in some situations, it sucks that's not the case on the other side. And so it makes things a little bit murky. But at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to provide as much value for people in any situation.
Yeah, I vibe with that. That's what I came to last year after my kind of spiritual, emotional journey with it was that exact same thing. It's like even the people that I had bad feelings for, some of them for years, I've now not only forgiven, I wish them the best and hope that they have the best and the most abundance because the lessons that I've learned came from them. And what I realized was that, my mind would operate on the negatives, and I was not focusing on all the amazing, beautiful things that I had of it, just like you said. And man, if I had some, if I go knocking with guys, you're not going to knock the no solicit. And I'm like, I do not have the temperament, man, because if you come out like I still have not matured there.
Same way.
I'm like, you cannot. I don't care what it says. You're not going to, So, but I've matured in those ways, and it's been fun watching you guys. That's a really cool takeaway. So, Doug and Luke, man, these two guys are.
They're good.
They're good, man. They're still a little unicorn. So I have this story about Luke. It's funny. He's just the sweetest guy, right? He's just so fun and everything. And sometimes I text him, and he texts. He'll hit me on Instagram like, "Is this what's going on?" And then I texted him one time, and it was fun. And he gets so serious so fast. And I was texting him about this dude, and he goes, "Does he have a team?" And I go, "No." And then he never texted me back. And I was like, my man, I love that.
Yeah.
But they're so inspirational. And when you get around them, there's a little bit of genius in each of how they move and how they operate. Luke with, he's a magnet of
these guys
he's a human magnet. Like you're like a super magnet, right? And then Doug is like a brain, right? And not quite as, but he's a magnet too. and you have had the opportunity to work, in the office with those guys for almost 3 years. What has that been like, and what is the impact? Talking about working around mentors, what has that been like?
It's been incredible, man, and nothing short of it. I feel a little bit selfish, and I almost feel a little bit guilty, where Legacy's been around eight going on 9 years, right? And to be able to come into an opportunity to where I get to just sit back and watch these guys operate. I do it all the time. I watch the way they talk. I watch the way they present. I watch the way they handle situations. I watch the way that every time something huge catastrophe happens at Legacy, I've watched them bounce back and get twice as good, twice as fast, twice as strong, right? And I could talk about these two all day, but you're right. Luke is Luke's the teddy bear. Luke's the guy that can pump you up, the rah-rah. He makes you feel good. He's Doug's right hand, right? He will do anything and anytime, anywhere for anybody. We have guys that, my flight got delayed. I won't land until 9 p.m. Luke will text, hey, I could take him to dinner, right? Or, hey, I can wine and dine for a minute. And Doug's the exact same way. We had an issue come up a couple of months ago to where Doug was like, hey, I'm going to hit church for 2 hours. I can meet with you guys right after that. And we met up at Seth's house on a Sunday, right? And hashed things out and went through a 4-hour meeting on a Sunday. And so that's one of the things that is extremely easy to rally around is when the guys that are calling the shots are working twice as hard as you. It's extremely easy to keep sprinting.
Yeah.
Right. These guys are the first in the office. The last one's out. I've seen multiple times where, Doug's supposed to be at a baseball game or a football game and he's got 20 minutes and he's talking until he has 30 seconds left and he is sprinting out of the building, or he's taking recruits with him to a ball game, right, to keep the meeting going. And so it's easy, man. I saw the sincerity, I saw the passion, I saw the intensity in these guys the first day I met with them.
Yeah, me too.
And when you believe in something as much as they do, it's so easily to pass that buy-in, to pass that emotion. And so it's easy for me to get excited about Legacy. It's easy for me to get to recruit to Legacy. It's easy for me to tell people like there is no price, right? That was our motto last year.
No price, yeah.
And the reason being is because these two human beings. Doug texts me all the time, calls me all the time of like, hey, I know you guys went through some stuff last summer that was extremely hard. How are you doing? Oh, dude, and I usually give him the cliche answer. Things are good, numbers are good, guys are bought in, let's go. And he's like, no, I'm not talking about that bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, how are you? How are the kids? How is the wife? And those are the things that mean so much, and those are the things that those guys are so good at.
Yeah.
Is just being great human beings.
Yeah.
They're both great dads. They're both great husbands. They're both phenomenal people. They're both willing to give back at any given time. They'll do anything for anybody. And they absolutely love what they do. They absolutely believe in what they're doing. And they want to take as many people on the rocket ship as they can.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. Doug shared at the leadership retreat, and I can't share what he shared because the first thing he put on the screen was a but he, it was impactful for me, because dealing with you and Seth, I deal with you guys on a different level.
Yep.
And it's easier for my mind, if I'm just honest with you, to get my head around you guys, right? Like, I understand your positions better. I don't, I sit in a room with Doug and I'm like, this dude he's smart, man. Luke's smart. They built this thing, right?
100%.
Still a little hard to get my head around them, but Doug stood up on a stage. And so what is trust? What is loyalty? It's when nobody's looking. Yeah. And Doug stood up on a stage and told us that he had rearranged some of the things in Legacy that would help us out that weren't previously arranged like that. And him and Luke had sat in a room and decided that the way that they had things set up could be better for the people. And I was like, first of all, but it was better for them the old way.
Yeah.
I'm like, first of all, you didn't have to tell anybody that there was another way. Yeah. Second of all, you didn't have to sit there and have a conversation and say, what's better for our people? And then after you had the conversation, you didn't have to change it. And then after you changed it, you came and told us. And that was one of the moments where I felt, more in love with Legacy itself. Because, I've always loved Seth as a friend and a brother, and then get to work with him. And then I meet you, and I really start to respect how you move, and then I kind of fall in love with you as a human, like a brother, and I don't have that closeness with them, but that was just a moment that really and then I start to see why you and Seth operate the way that you operate. Yeah. And it's been a cool thing, man. It's been neat, and it's been neat to work around people like you and Seth and Doug and Luke, and it's cool to be in the rooms with you guys,
Yeah, we went through something extremely difficult last summer, as you know, Lee.
Yeah.
And being able to watch the way that Doug and Luke handled the situation.
Yeah.
There could have been a million different outcomes. There could have been a million different ways they handled the situation.
Yep.
And to stay as loyal as they did, and to back someone, I should say, not something, but back someone as much as they did, and to show as much love and support as they did, it taught me everything I needed to know about those guys for the rest of my life.
I want to talk about that and you. So, Seth is your business, and I want to talk about dynamic relationships. So Seth went through some personal stuff. That's his business, so you and I won't talk about it.
Yep.
But he went through some personal stuff. And listen, anybody that's been in the industry a long time, whether you just started doors, you go through a death or a divorce or personal issues, and they really can take a toll on you. And we're all human. And, Seth had some personal issues that affected him. And you, Doug and Luke aside, how you moved was, and I was, me and Misty came up, we would talk to you, and I was scared to death. And I was like, geez, man, this, this and that. And you were, so here's a good example. One of my guys was just in, and, he's right now he's a setter. He's trying to be a closer. And, he says, I'm scared and my wife's scared. And I'm like, that's your problem right there. You can't afford to let your wife be scared. 100%. And your fear should be just driving you on doors, man. You go harder. You don't have time to be scared. Go harder. Good. And when Misty's scared, it's my job to be strong. And when me and Misty were scared, you were strong. And you were kind of that unshakable force that was like, let me know that no matter what, everything was going to be okay. And when we went to the leadership retreat, it was your share. It makes me almost tear up. Your share was powerful, dude, because I really got a inside look at how much you had been personally impacted. And it was a trip to hear you share because you had been such a rock for everyone. Yeah. And so, I want to hear your side of how you navigated that with the level of maturity and strength that you did. You steered the ship there for a minute, and you rocked that shit, bro. You handled that. What was that like for you?
Dude, it was wild.
Yeah.
It was a situation that, one, I had never been part of in my entire life, right? And two, even if I had been through something like that, I had never been responsible for 1,000+ people.
It's a lot.
Right. And so
families.
That was it. That was the hardest part for me. And just like you said, for me to be able to work at my best, I have to eliminate all emotion. When I get emotional, the hinges come off. Yeah. And so you and Misty probably felt it during those conversations of it was like, no, I'm not worried about timeline. Yeah. I'm not worried about them coming out. Not worried about anything. If I would have got worried, things would have been dramatically different. Right. And so that was part of the limiting emotion. The second part is I had seen the way Seth moves with his people, with his friends, with me. I had seen him bet the ranch on me. And so I was willing to do the exact same.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this, and we continue to talk about this all the time. If we lost everything tomorrow, which we would never hope for in a million years, right? But as long as we had each other, as long as we still have the skill set that we do on doors, like we'll go rebuild the ship tomorrow.
100%.
And so that was kind of the mindset going through something so tough. Was I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that I'm a rock for Seth.
Yeah.
And to let him know throughout the entire process, like, we're supporting you, we're loving you, we're giving you a chance, like, let's get through this. I feel like if I would have started to waver, if I would have started to get emotionally invested in what was going on, the outcome could have been a little bit different. And so it was tough, man. It was emotionally exhausting. I've never worked more in my entire life. I remember leaving the building at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. I think I shared this in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And I'd just be screaming, right? Like, because of the calls, the texts, the what's going on, how's Seth, where's everybody at, what do we do next? And it was nonstop. It was nonstop for 4 months.
It's a big division, man.
And so that, on top of the pressure of having to deliver for 1,000 people and their families, on top of not knowing what the outcome of this thing looked like, it was a lot, man.
Yeah, you handled it, man. And, let's talk about principles, right? So, one of the things that's hurt me the most in my life is people that I loved not having my back when they should. I've helped people get into the game, and instead of helping me build us together, me and them, they I see a lot of this in the industry. There's people who are an opportunist, and there's people who are a purist. And the purist really lives on a principle-based life. Like, I'm in this with you. I'm going to help you. I'm going to fix you. We're going to get better together. And the opportunist just looks for any time that they can just take everything and just go kind of cut your throat and do their own shit, which is, it's part of the game, And I've learned I can't change that. But those are the things that have hurt me the most. And I consider myself to be a purist in a lot of my principles. Have I always acted the right or been the most emotionally mature? No, but I've always been, or I'm a ride or die. And talking to you, thinking about Misty and how she is, and like, it's the same thing. Like, she would die on the sword for me, but more importantly, she lives for me. And I watched you do that, with Seth, and it's like the importance of understanding. Building a big thing that's harder, it's impossible to hold with two hands, and it takes more than four hands. But having that partnership where the loyalty and the love and the trust is so pure that you're not looking for an opportunity to cut your brother's throat or exodus or take the thing. It's like, no matter what, it's till the wheels fall off, and I'm gonna help you when you can't help yourself. Yeah. And that's what I saw with that, man. And that was like, it just gave me an ultimate level of respect for you, because the cool thing about Notorious is, for me, and I put this on the leadership thread, and we have, and sometimes I don't always post back because I'm the guy who likes to really just kind of read everybody's stuff and just soak it in and not have to think about replying, because I just want to feel what they're saying. Yeah. But I put it back that, like, being here has shown me that I'm because it's easy to think when so many bad things happen that everybody's like that. There's so many people like us, and if I would say that that's our truest culture, is that this huge group of people have come together who really just want the best for each other, and you are just a shining example of that, man. Yeah. It's been pretty dope. Brother. So tell me about the dynamic partnership. What do you and Seth do different, better, good, the same? Like, what makes you guys so fucking rad? Yeah,
honestly, dude, it was crazy how fast it meshed, right? Like, it's Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, right? It's been unbelievable. And Seth has been so good for so long. He just, I think...
He's all right.
Yeah.
He's all right.
He's mediocre.
Yeah, at best.
But he's been one of those guys that I think when they get that good for that long, they kind of can't see their holes.
Yeah.
Right? They can't see their blind spots. And so coming in and him taking feedback and criticism as well as he has or does.
He's humble.
It was really easy for me to help him level up a little bit.
Yeah.
And vice versa. He's helped me scale tremendously, especially in communication and tough communication where he excels. And so We're a little bit of a good cop, bad cop, right? He's phenomenal at recruiting. I'm phenomenal at relationships. He's phenomenal at selling. I'm phenomenal at systems and processes. And the ultimate, I guess, kind of driver for us is we both align ourselves with the exact same principles, right? I don't think either of us have been the best in the world. I don't think any of us have been the sharpest or the sexiest or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But I promise you, we're both as loyal as it gets. We both trust tremendously. We both love fast and hard. I mean, it's one of those things that we respect the shit out of anybody. It's one of those things that we have so many very similar views and so many very similar interests when it comes to people and relationships, but then filling in on him being a little bit more blunt. He likes to get right to the point. You know, he's one of those dudes that, you know, he executes extremely swift and extremely fast and hard. Where I'm a little bit different. I want to get to know the situation. I want to look at it from a million different lenses before we make an educated decision. And being able to do a little bit of that at the same time, I think, has been extremely dynamic in the partnership.
I love that, man. It's crazy. You know, I love being a student of the game, and it's almost every highly successful, you know, partnership has these. It's really just a yin and a yang. It sounds cliche, but it is. And you guys work so well together. So just a few more questions, man. You know, I've been on this thing on culture. You know, I love the scope, the size of the realness of culture, you know, and I think a lot of people have this topical, like, oh, it's the hat, it's the shirt, it's the this, it's the, and it's not, you know, and so, you know, what is the culture of, and I guess more than just culture, what is the culture of Notorious to you? Like, what are we?
Yeah, man, really good question. It's funny, right? Culture and door to door are so hand in hand, or what people perceive as being hand in hand. For the longest time, and I still think some of the misunderstanding in the industry is, oh, Notorious is about the $5,000 shoes and the Rolexes and the flash and the Sam Nina's 7 cars and yada yada yada, and it couldn't be further from that, right? I think the culture in Notorious is something that you instantly feel when you come into Notorious if you want to feel it. Yeah. It's one of those things that if you want to be real, if you want to be authentic, if you want to be vulnerable, if you want to be loved, if you want to love, it's one of those things that it's a safe place to do it. Yeah. Most people in the industry, their egos don't let them do it. And so that's why when people are, you know, our culture is about competition and gear and swag and all these different things, it's because they're not vulnerable enough to understand what culture is at the root. Yeah. And culture at the root, to me, it's the intangibles. It's the feeling. It's the gut instinct you get when you walk into a room, right? Ray Lewis talked to us about this a little bit in Louisiana. But it's almost what you're known for. It's almost what you're remembered as. And when Ray Lewis walks into a room, he said, "Mother effers, no, it's Ray Lewis." Yeah. Right? And he asked, like, what if a lion walked into the room? Everybody yells, "Oh shit, it's a lion." It's a lion. Right? And it's the exact same thing. When you walk into a Notorious room, we want you to know, like, holy shit, this is love, this is loyalty, this is trust, this is respect, this is a safe place to be vulnerable. Yeah. That's what our culture is. Yeah. I love that. And that's, you know, for me, I feel like I fit in, you know, and it's weird because I don't have, I don't want to say I'm a reclusive person, but my actual friends, the people that I'm vulnerable with on a daily basis, are limited. And I think probably like most people, but it's been a joy for me to be, you know, in groups and chats and rooms and meetings and conferences with just so many humans that are just so dope. Yep. You know, I thank you for coming on the show, brother. And it's been an honor to get to know you. I get emotional, but to watch you move, you know, like, to me, it's in battle. Yeah. I like to see how you move in battle, because I've been on a battlefield and had somebody standing beside me that walked into battle with me stab me in the back.
And, those aren't the kind of people that I want to be around. And to be around you and watch how you've moved in battle, in real battle, like some of these things, mental, spiritual, physical, financial. Listen, when money gets big, real big, real big. And when emotions get big, they get super big. And feelings get big and they get hard, and they're hard choices, and people are naysaying and this is and that's is, and you're on your pillow and you can't sleep. That's battle, and how people move in those moments, that's who you are, and watching you walk through that with, someone that I love very much, and just seeing how you move and how you've treated me and how you've supported me emotionally. I remember I called you and I was just tanked, and I was like, oh, fucking airplane's going to follow me, Cam, and it's all going to explode, and I'm going to move in, I'm going to live in under the bridge, and, I'm going to be homeless in 2 days. You know how the mind goes, and that's, my mind, it was just, oh my God. And just like how you just got a hold of me, and you weren't having a great time either. And like you were able to get a hold of me and pull me out of that and give me the courage and the love that I needed in the moment. And I do that for my people now. But that's the real deal, and in my opinion, when we have a group of people like this, and it's just so special, man. So, I'm grateful for you, man.
No, man, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a pleasure working and more so getting to know you and Misty, right? It's one of those things that I think about all the time is, how much value can you create for other people, and what are you going to be remembered for?
Yeah.
And that's what really gets me to tick. That's what really gets me to go work 12, 14, 16 hours a day. The money's phenomenal. I love money as much as anybody. The titles, the opportunity, everything is great, sexy, cool, whatever it is. But it's really, what are we going to be remembered for, and how much value can you create for other people to make their life a little bit better?
Man, mic drop right there. I love you, Cam, bro.
Thanks, bro.
Thanks for coming on, bro.
Love you, man.
Love you.